Summer of Second Chances. Claire Dawson had survived New York City's publishing industry for 9 straight years. That was 9 years of 16-hour workdays, overpriced lattes, editor-in-chief egos, and more passive-aggressive emails than she cared to count. So when her therapist raised an eyebrow and said, "Maybe you just need to leave," Claire took it as divine intervention. Which is how she ended up driving a rented Jeep down the coastal highway of Maine, with a suitcase full of linen dresses, 3 books she wouldn't read, and a very firm belief that her Airbnb would be the peaceful sanctuary the listing had promised. But when she pulled into the graveled driveway of 14 Lantern Lane, her jaw dropped. There was no house. Well, technically there was a house, but it wasn't finished. It looked more like a construction site. A skeleton of beams, plywood, and ladders, surrounded by stacks of lumber and orange cones. She killed the engine and sat in stunned silence. "This has to be a joke," she muttered, pulling out her phone to check the address again. "Correct." She opened the Airbnb app. Charming coastal cottage with ocean view, quiet, private, perfect for reflection. She stepped out of the car just as a figure emerged from around the back of the structure. Tall, broad-shouldered, sun-tanned. He wore a backwards baseball cap, jeans dusty with sawdust, and a white t-shirt that clung to his frame in a way that made her very aware she hadn't dated in over a year. But when he turned, Claire's stomach flipped. "No freaking way!" "Ethan?" she blurted out before she could stop herself. He froze mid-step, narrowed his eyes, then blinked in disbelief. "Claire Dawson! Are you kidding me?" She laughed, but it came out high and awkward. "Apparently not." They stood facing each other in the dusty sunlight, both stunned. It had been 12 years since graduation, 10 since the last time they spoke, and yet here he was, her first kiss, her first heartbreak, and apparently the guy building her non-existent rental cottage. "What are you doing here?" he asked finally, wiping his hands on a rag from his back pocket. "I rented this place for the summer, for self-care." She immediately regretted the last phrase. "What are you doing here?" "I'm building this place." "Right, that makes sense." He grinned just a little. "You always had a way with words." Claire folded her arms. "Okay, funny, but seriously, where's the house? The listing said it was done." He scratched the back of his head. "Yeah, the owner jumped the gun. He posted it before I even finished the kitchen foundation. I told him it'd take another month, but he's in Florida and thinks time is imaginary." "Great. So no plumbing, no electricity, no bed? Just good vibes and plywood. Awesome." Claire stood there trying to decide whether she should laugh or cry or sue someone. Ethan watched her, then exhaled. "Look, I've got a guest cabin behind my workshop. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and it has a working shower. You're welcome to stay until you figure out what to do." She raised an eyebrow. "You're offering me shelter? After all these years?" He shrugged, half smiling. "Well, you haven't changed much. Still look like you'd rather die than ask for help." She snorted. "That's accurate." "So, what do you say?" She hesitated. There were a million reasons to say no, but the wind carried the scent of pine and sea salt, and she could already hear the faint rhythm of the waves down the road. She was tired, and maybe, just maybe, this was the kind of chaos she needed. "Fine," she said, "but I'm not splitting firewood or helping you install drywall." Ethan smiled widened. "Deal!" The cabin was cozy. A one-room structure with a kitchenette, a small bed, and shelves lined with mismatched books and mugs. There was a radio on the counter, tuned to a folk station. It smelled like cedar and lemon. Claire dropped her bags and turned in a slow circle. "Okay, this is actually kind of cute. Told you, it's not the Ritz, but it has hot water and a view of the stars." She glanced at him. "You were always annoyingly confident. And you were always impossible to impress." They shared a small, nostalgic silence. The air between them was charged, not in a romantic way, but in the "what the hell are you doing in my life again" kind of way. Ethan cleared his throat. "I'll let you settle in. There's a coffee shop in town called Salty Brew. If you're up for it, I'm usually there around 8. Are you asking me out?" He grinned. "I'm offering you caffeine. If that leads to something else, who knows?"
Claire rolled her eyes, but a smile tugged at her lips. "We'll see." That night, Claire sat outside on the tiny porch, legs curled under her, watching the sky turn from deep indigo to star-speckled black. The air was quiet in a way New York never was. No horns, no sirens, just wind, crickets, and the occasional distant bark of a dog. She sipped a cup of tea she found in the cabin's cupboard. It was chamomile, slightly stale but oddly comforting. 12 years. 12 years since she had left this town with big dreams and no intention of looking back. And now here she was, sharing property lines with the boy she once thought she'd marry, sleeping in his spare cabin and pretending she wasn't curious about what he'd been up to all this time. Claire wrapped her sweater tighter and leaned back in the chair. This summer was already not what she expected. And maybe that was the point.
The bell above the cafe door jingled with that satisfying little chime Claire hadn't heard in years. Back in Manhattan, coffee shops didn't jingle. They barked your name over espresso machines and smelled like stress. Salty brew, on the other hand, smelled like roasted hazelnut, sea breeze, and cinnamon scones. It was small, sunlit, with mismatched chairs and local art lining the walls. A chalkboard near the counter read, "Life begins after coffee," and maybe a good mistake or two. Claire smiled at that. "Claire?" She turned. Ethan stood near the window in a booth, 2 coffees already on the table. He raised his eyebrows in playful pride. "Guessing your order hasn't changed? Black, no sugar, no nonsense?" She slid into the booth with a smirk. "You remembered?" Some things are hard to forget. Claire lifted the mug, took a sip, and tried not to let his voice do things to her ribcage. The coffee was strong and perfect. Damn him. They talked. Not the forced small talk of exes who bumped into each other in a grocery store, but real talk, the kind you slip into when nostalgia meets curiosity. He told her how, after dropping out of college, he traveled the West Coast in a beat-up van before returning home to take care of his dad, who had gotten sick. His father passed 2 years ago, and Ethan stayed. Started a small carpentry business, built decks, homes, boats, and occasionally repaired guitars for extra cash. "I thought you'd be in L.A. by now, or opening for Jack Johnson." Ethan chuckled. "Turns out I liked building things more than chasing spotlights." Claire hesitated. "You always were good with your hands." He arched a brow. "Pretty sure that's a flirt." She lifted her mug again. "Pretty sure you're imagining things." The conversation drifted to their high school days, the midnight swims, secret songs he used to write her, the fight they had before prom. "I never hated you," she said suddenly, surprising even herself. Ethan looked at her, quiet now. "I didn't ask if you did." "I know. That was part of the problem." A beat passed. "I didn't follow you to New York because I thought you needed space, but I think I was just scared you'd outgrow me." Claire looked down at her cup. "Maybe I did, but maybe I didn't grow into the person I thought I would either." Outside the window, seagulls coasted lazily over the harbor. Inside, the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of all the things they never said at 19, now finally getting airtime. Ethan leaned back, folded his arms. "So what now? Are you going to spend the whole summer hiding out in my cabin, avoiding conversations like this?" Claire shrugged. "Depends. Are there more scones where this came from?" He laughed, easy and real. "Plenty, especially if you help me sand the deck tomorrow." Hard pass. "Come on, I'll even let you pick the radio station." She sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "What if I pick early 2000s emo?" "Then I'll assume you're working through something." "I am. It's called regret." They left the cafe together. The sun was brighter than she remembered small-town mornings being. Ethan walked her to her car, hands in his pockets. As she opened the door, he said, "Hey, Claire." She turned, hair caught slightly by the breeze. "I know this isn't how you planned your summer, but I'm glad you're here." She looked at him,
Same ocean-colored eyes, same lopsided grin, and smiled. Yeah, me too. That night, Claire stood on the beach near the cabin, toes buried in the cool sand. The moon hung low, casting silver light over the waves. She wrapped her cardigan tighter and listened to the ocean breathe. She didn't know where this was going, but she didn't need to. Not yet.
The next morning, Claire showed up at the construction site in yoga pants, an oversized flannel shirt, and sunglasses too large for her face. Ethan looked up from the deck frame, hammer in hand. Well, if it isn't the Queen of Manhattan gracing us with her labor. She raised her coffee cup. Don't get used to it. I'm here strictly for the scones and light bullying. He laughed and tossed her a pair of work gloves. You remember how to hold a power drill? I once edited a 700-page manuscript in 36 hours without crying. I can handle a drill. The work was oddly therapeutic. Ethan showed her how to pre-drill and set screws, how to measure planks, and even how to argue with a level that refused to agree with reality. They worked side by side for hours, sweat and sawdust coating their arms. At one point, Ethan reached past her to grab a tool, and for half a second, his arm brushed hers. It was nothing, and yet it wasn't. Claire blinked, heart skipping. She caught his glance. He'd felt it too. At lunch, they sat on the half-finished porch, legs dangling off the edge. Ethan handed her a sandwich wrapped in brown paper. You still hate mustard? Violently. I remembered. She took a bite, chewed, then said, It's weird. Being here with you, it feels like I never left. Ethan nodded slowly. It's like time paused and just waited for us to come back. Claire looked out at the coastline. The tide was pulling out, leaving ribbons of seaweed and shells. You ever think about what would have happened if we didn't break up? She asked softly. All the time, he admitted. Sometimes I imagine that version of us, the one that stayed. And he looked at her, serious now. I think they were happy, but maybe not ready. Claire swallowed hard. That evening, Ethan invited her to his workshop. It was a wide open space filled with tools, scraps of wood, and the scent of pine. Guitars lined one wall, all hand-built, some still unfinished. Do you still play? She asked, running a finger along one polished neck. Sometimes, not for crowds, just for me. He sat on a stool, picked up a guitar, and began to strum. The sound was low and mellow, like warm honey. Claire sat across from him, watching his fingers move like memory. He started singing, a quiet, bluesy tune. She didn't recognize it until she did. It was a song he wrote for her, back when they were 17. Claire's breath caught in her throat. When he finished, she said, I can't believe you remember that. Ethan set the guitar down. Some things don't leave. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of old feelings, like a house they once lived in together, a place they hadn't visited in years but somehow still had keys to. Ethan stood slowly, walked toward her, and for a long moment he looked at her like he was reading a familiar book, one he never finished but always wanted to. Claire didn't move, didn't speak. Then gently, he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I missed this, he whispered. Me too. But just as their lips nearly met, Claire stepped back. Just a few inches, but enough. Not yet, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Ethan searched her face, then nodded. No rush. That night, Claire lay awake in the cabin, heart racing. It would have been so easy to fall into old patterns, to kiss him, to pretend that no time had passed. But something told her this wasn't a summer fling. This was something deeper. And if they were going to get it right this time, they had to do it slow.
Weeks passed like pages turning in a summer novel, slow, golden, and too easy to get lost in. Claire and Ethan had fallen into a rhythm: morning coffee, afternoon sawdust, late-night walks by the shore. Somehow, it didn't feel fragile. It felt like something real was blowing between them, steady and warm. But peace has a way of testing you, and New York doesn't forget. The email came on a Sunday morning. Claire opened her phone while still in bed, sunlight cutting across the quilt. At first, she didn't recognize the sender. Harper and Sloan, senior acquisitions offer. She sat up slowly. Claire, we'd love to bring you back. Full-time, senior acquisitions, starting September. Flexible relocation bonus, $145,000 a year. Let us know by Friday. You were always our best. Martin G. Her heart thudded against her ribs. It was everything she used to want, everything she'd built her life around. But now, staring out the window at the pine trees, the unfinished house, the old boat in the distance, it all felt far away. That evening, she was quiet over dinner. Ethan noticed. "You okay?" Claire forced a smile. "Just tired." But her eyes drifted, not to him, but past him, toward something she didn't want to admit was calling. The next morning, she sat on the beach alone, phone in hand, thumb hovering over reply. Ethan found her there, hands in his pockets, shirt sleeves rolled up, that same calm look in his eyes. "I thought maybe you got lost." She looked up, surprised. "I did," she said quietly. He sat beside her in the sand. "Want to tell me about it?" She hesitated. Then, "Harper and Sloan offered me my old job back. Promotion. A lot of money." Ethan's jaw tensed just a little. "And?" "She haven't said yes." He looked at her. "But you haven't said no either." Claire turned the phone over in her hands. "When I left New York, I thought I needed space, to breathe. But now that I have it, I don't know who I am without all the noise." Ethan nodded slowly. "Sometimes silence is the only way you hear your real voice." She gave a small, sad laugh. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not, but staying for the wrong reasons is worse than leaving for the right ones." She glanced at him, heart aching. "And what if I don't know which is which?" He reached out, brushed sand from her wrist, and said quietly, "Then give yourself the time to figure it out. But don't disappear without telling me." That night, Claire sat on the cabin porch long after the stars had come out. The job was everything she thought she wanted, but Ethan was everything she didn't know she needed. And for the first time in years, she wasn't sure which part of herself to listen to, the woman who chased dreams, or the one who was finally starting to feel home.
Friday came like a storm cloud. Claire hadn't replied to the email. She hadn't told Ethan anything more either. She needed space, she said, and he gave it to her. But the silence was heavy. That morning she stood at the edge of the dock, the town still sleeping behind her. The offer expired in 12 hours. Her phone buzzed in her hand. "One last reminder. We need your decision. Harper and Sloan." She turned it off. Back at the cabin, she found a note taped to the door. "I'm finishing the deck. Thought you might want to see it done. E." Claire tucked the note in her pocket and walked to the half-built house. When she arrived, Ethan was on the porch, hammering the last plank in place. He looked up, sweaty, tired,
and maybe, just maybe, a little guarded. Claire stood at the edge of the stairs. "You always finish what you start?" He didn't smile. "I try." A long pause. Then she said, "I'm not going back to New York." Ethan stared at her. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but I know what I'm not doing. I'm not running back to a life I already outgrew." He set the hammer down, took a step closer. "I didn't want to be the reason you stayed," he said. "You're not," she whispered. "But you're the reason I'm not afraid to." The next few seconds stretched like an eternity. Then Ethan reached for her hand, and she didn't let go. They stood together on that new porch, not on solid ground yet, but on something they had built with their own hands. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Later that evening, as the sky blushed pink and the ocean hummed its endless rhythm, Ethan pulled out his old guitar. Claire curled beside him, legs tucked under her, a blanket around her shoulders. He strummed once, twice, then looked at her and smiled. "So, what do we call this story?" Claire leaned her head on his shoulder. "A second chance," she said. He kissed her forehead. "No, the real one," he whispered.